Hello and welcome to Talk Spooky to Me, the Ghost Story Guys mail show. I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestall.
And this is our chance to hear from you, our audience. Paul Bestall, my friend, how you doing?
I'm all right, thanks. It's been a pretty quiet week here in soggy Sheffield. Few interviews, few horror films. No strange incidents to report at all.
I think that's because all the strangeness got collected on my side of the table this week.
Good.
Yeah, so as you know, as I'm fond of mentioning, our Instagram is vastly more popular than our show. We it's comical at this point. And of course, every now and again, someone will give a shit for reposting one of their memes saying that we're making money off their backs. And I have to explain to them that no, in Canada, we cannot access any of the Instagram creator funds. So we make no money. We steal your jokes for free is basically what I tell them. But every now and again, I'll get an odd message. And I've said before that I was contacted at one point by a rapper who was fairly well known at the time. He had a question about witchcraft. So I was able to answer that question for him. And there was a story that went with that, which was very strange. This time I was contacted by someone who runs a meme account. And they do very, very well. They have far more followers than we do. But they had seen us come up somehow in their mentions. And now if you told me they had reached out to every show that had ghost in the name, well, I'd believe that too. But this person got in touch and they said, look, I have a question for you. It's not really a ghost thing per se, but it is kind of a strange thing. And I wonder if maybe you might have an answer. And they said it's about a missing person. And of course, this is, it's like ringing the bell for Bren. So I said, yeah. I said, I can try and help. I'm happy to do what I can. What's the case and what is your interest in the case? So this person went on to say that they do not believe in paranormal activity. They think that what we call paranormal is just some kind of scientific phenomenon not as yet measurable. But they said they do have dreams that kind of predict the future sometimes. They said that sometimes they'll have dreams and they'll know they'll know that someone close to them is sick before that person knows, or they will know that person is like someone is pregnant before they know, or one time their cat went missing and they dreamed its exact location. It was not a place they were used to that they knew really well, but they went and that's where the cat was. So, and as you know, I believe in these things. We've talked about these things many times on the show. I think it's possible. So I said, okay, yeah, of course I believe you. Like, that's fine. So where does this come next? And they said, well, so this is where it gets a little bit weird. They said, I have been for 10 years intermittently visited by the spirit of a little girl in my dreams. And that little girl told me that she was abducted and murdered some number of years ago. And she has told me that she was taken from a place that's not too far from where I live. She has told me so much about her life, and I would like to find out who she is because she wants me to tell her family that she's at peace and that they don't have to look for her anymore. I said, okay, that's interesting. I am curious to know a little more. Like, what else has she told you about her life? And this person went on to describe a not insignificant amount of information. But when I was going back through their messages, I saw something I had missed the first time around. And that is that when this little girl first appeared to them, she said, hey, I'm in this state park. Come find my body, please. That's a red flag. If a spirit is coming to you and telling you to go anywhere on your own, especially places where there are not people, that is a concern. So I said, okay. I said, I will look into this. And I told her a little story. Now, the story I told her, I don't think I've told this on the show. I've hinted at it in various ways. But I can kind of tell a neutered version. You know the whole story. But
yes,
basically, I was contacted by two different people a number of years ago regarding a missing persons in, we'll say, a part of the U.S. Now, both these people claim that they were contacted by the spirit of the missing girl who said that she had been abducted and murdered and that her body was in the trees. She had been hidden in the forest and they should come find her so she could be put at rest. So one of the people who had the stream actually went to the authorities. And to their credit, the police in that area, they went and looked. They didn't find anything. The second person, they just kind of kept a lid on it. They didn't say anything until they found out about what I do. And then they told me. So again, two different people told me this story. I asked around to a few different folks, and I heard this other version of the story, where this girl was not put in the trees, but she was actually dumped in a reservoir after the murder. So I thought, okay, this is not, I don't really do true crime because I don't like fucking around in people's lives because, like, you know, that's what it is, right? Like, people die and you're messing around in their lives. And especially, and I just don't think it's great for the family. If I go to someone and say, oh, don't worry, your daughter was abducted by ghosts or whatever, like, they don't want to fucking hear that. No one wants to hear that. So I tried not, I told my friend, I said, like, I'm not going to look at this too deeply, but I'm curious. So I hired a remote viewer to look into this for me. I said to this remote viewer, I said, hey, look, I know what I'm looking for. I don't know where it is. That's all I told this person. I said, those are and I gave them some four made up digits to represent the coordinates. But that's all they knew. I know what it is. I don't know where it is. So I was expecting to hear trees or water. And what the remote viewer came back with was, the item is intact, but has been moved several times. The item is being stored with other items of a similar nature. The item is in an open structure on a rural property. I'm seeing shells, either seashells or bullet shells. So maybe there's a gun range or a lake nearby. I'm seeing the word, a word, and there's a few other things. So I'm like, okay, well, that's not trees. That's not water. So if we accept that the remote, and this, I understand, we're like, this is supposition on top of supposition on top of supposition, but if we accept that the remote viewer knows what she's doing, at least as much as the people who had claimed to have psychic visions of this girl, that girl is not in the water like the rumor I heard, but she's also not where those people were told to look, which begs the question, what called out to two different, unrelated, unknown to each other people in their dreams, telling them to come find them in the woods alone? That sounds to me like something is trying to fuck with them. And of course, there's a book I always like to talk about in the show, the one I sent you a copy of, The Siren Call of Hungry Ghosts.
Yes.
Where the journalist Joe Fisher was fed a series of lies by a spirit through a medium that he latched onto and came to believe wholeheartedly. He believed this was his lover from a past life and that she was not born into this life, but they would be together in the next one. And that came to take over his entire life. And of course, then he went to Greece and everything the spirit had said was a lie. The locations were not real. Every single thing was a lie. And ultimately, Joe Fisher killed himself in 2001. So I said this to this person. I said, look, I'm going to look for this girl. I'm going to have a peek around, see if I can find a case that matches all the specifics of what you've described. But I think you should know these things that I've told you. And I think you should really sit with the question, if this girl can tell you all this information about her over the course of 10 years, why can't she tell you her name? And if she can tell you all this information, and it was a lot of information, why is there nothing hard in it? There's nothing that can be used to pinpoint our identity. If you look at it objectively, it's all information that is, to me, intended to make you feel sorry for the person telling it to you. But there's nothing hard in it. There's nothing like, she's like, oh, I think she was abducted she lived in one of these areas. But the three areas that was mentioned are quite large. So it's a major metropolitan area. So that doesn't really mean anything. And again, the parents are mentioned quite a bit, but never a name, never a hard name of a pet or a first name of mom or a first name of dad. Just a lot of stuff about how the parents weren't very nice to her. I said, I think it's worth kind of sitting with the fact that this entity has told you all these things, but none of it's of any use. And the fact that this all followed on from the very first day, them saying to you, hey, I'm out here in the woods, come get me. So I did some looking around and I found a couple cases, that I wouldn't say matched what this person said, but they were in the ballpark. So I sent them over to this person and I haven't heard anything back. It's been almost a week now. And so I don't think they liked what I had to say.
Or they've gone to the woods.
Or they've gone to the woods. That is also very possible. Hopefully not. Yeah, so that was an unexpected conversation I had. And like, it's I don't even have anything funny to say about it. Like, it's, folks, we believe in the shit we talk about on the show, and it's not entertainment. Like, what we do is hopefully entertaining, but there we go. There's the humor. Like, if you get a message from something or someone, I understand it's exciting and it's fun and it's cool. And it's like, oh, fuck, it's happening. It's actually happening. You got to evaluate that rationally. Just because something tells you a fact does not make it true. The other thing I said to this person was, like, every other dream you've described to me that came true is something you saw. You saw that person being sick. You saw that person, oh, they're pregnant. You saw where your cat was. All you saw in this dream was this girl. So, yeah, sure, I believe that is real. I'm not doubting that you saw what you say you saw, but everything else she told you. And I think that's really significant.
Well, as with anything, if it's too good to be true, it probably is.
That's it. Except for our conversation with author Mike Bass on this episode.
Hurrah!
Which is really great. And yeah, that was a bad transition. I'm just fucking around. But no, yeah, like, again, I'm trying to be as vague as possible because I don't want to scare this person off, but I don't think they have anything else to say. Like, it's been almost a week since I sent over those news clippings. And I just don't think they liked, as you say, either they went to the woods or they didn't like what I had to say. Because again, I said, I believe you, but I don't think you're getting all the information. And I think maybe something is, you can't dismiss the possibility that something is trying to fuck with you.
Yeah, definitely. You've got to be very careful.
Yeah. So that was my paranormal week, which is more than has been for a very long time. But yeah, so I wanted to share that with everyone, share that with you. And of course, as I mentioned in my very ham-fisted transition earlier, we do have author Mike Bass on the show to talk about his fabulous new folklore book. It really is exceptional stuff. He's going to be joining us. But before we do that, we're going to answer some listener mail.
Our courteous and efficient staff is on call 24 hours a day to serve all your supernatural elimination needs.
We're ready to believe you.
All right. So first up is from our patron, Peter. Peter says, I've had some competing priorities over the past few weeks and have spent the last few weeks binge listening to GSG, M&M's, and Southern Gothic. Glad to be back. Well, it's good to have you back, Peter. Peter goes on to say, Fear Daily. Wow, this is such a great show, Bren. Love the overarching story. These are casts, posts from BBS. That is ghostly in and of itself. And the stories are genuinely creepy. Yellow Cake is my latest favorite, like the opening storyboard for a really scary and claustrophobic horror flick. Alien in a bunker. And Brandon's delivery is always pitch perfect. Well, thanks, Peter. Yeah, that one, Yellow Cake, is an adaptation of basically a Tommyknocker lore, but set in a continuation of government facility for the U.S. government. So I think it was Mount Weather, I think is where I said it. I based, like, my descriptions of the interior are based on the descriptions of an author who was actually in one of these nuclear bunkers. The next one is the important one here. For Paul particularly, Luis Elizondo is coming to Dallas to speak on U.S. military activity regarding UFOs. Do you know anything about him, and can you recommend making the effort to go and hear him?
I would say, first of all, 100% go, without a shadow of a doubt. Whilst in the world of ufology, there are lots of competing theories in regards to Louis, I am very much on the fence with this. I think, as I said earlier, if something seems too good to be true, it probably isn't. And I think the whole ATAP, To the Stars Academy and everything, and all the work, is it really as groundbreaking as it is? But the problem with ufology is it's a very murky soup. And often anybody that comes in from the cold, i.e. from the government side, tends to suddenly start having their character assassinated and questions about who they are and were they really there and did they really do what they say they did. It would seem that most of the stuff he's claimed he did. You know, he was a very decorated veteran. He served some tours of duty in some of the most challenging zones around the world over the last 25 years. He's clearly a company man, I think they would consider him to be, who had enough of the duplicity at work there. And so he's probably front and center right now in the sort of reevaluation of the UFO field, and the fact that the conversation is far more serious over the last 5 or 6 years than it's probably ever been since, I don't know, late 40s, early 50s. And it certainly seems to have pulled it back from the joke it had become throughout the 90s, where it was just a stupid mess of nonsense most of the time. So I would say, Peter, go, because I think when you have the opportunity to hear these people speak in whichever field, my personal experience is if you don't go and something amazing happens, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. And if you go and you're bored, then at least you can say you've been.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, too, you get a much better sense of a person if you can actually see them in front of you.
Yes. Go for it, Peter.
And let us know how it goes.
Tell him I said hi.
Finally, Peter finishes with, thank you for your continued messaging on mental health. I lost my brother, I believe, to untreated illnesses brought on from untreated depression. Keep telling your listeners that there is always help and always hope. I've been listening to y'all now for several years, and it just keeps getting better. Keep up the good work, Peter. And Peter, I'm so sorry for your loss, and thank you for the kind words. We're gonna keep doing this as long as our audience wants to hear us doing it.
And even if they don't.
That's it. Yeah, 100%.
Our next message is from Shelby, who writes, "Hello, gentlemen. I've been listening for a while and meaning to write in. A conversation you both had on the Crimes of the Paranormal episode spurred me on to do so. The conversation discussed how often stories of racism and misogyny are covered up by paranormal legend. It reminded me of a 2023 episode of the NPR podcast, The American Life, called The Problem with Ghosts. They had a segment on the show called Ghost Industrial Complex that tackles ghost tours in Savannah and a lot of the made-up ghost stories that actually erase the horrors of slavery in the city. As a Southern USA woman, I find that a lot of the folklore I grew up with often has a dark history behind it. I know this is something that happens in a lot of places around the world, but it definitely seems prevalent in the Southern US. Given your conversation and similar takeaways, I thought you might both enjoy that episode if you hadn't heard it as yet. I have the utmost respect for the both of you and your commitment to speak up on these injustices, rather than just looking for a good ghost story. I always look forward to new episodes dropping and getting to laugh along with your banter, much to my wife's chagrin. Keep fighting the good fight. Shelby."
Well, thank you, Shelby. I've never listened to This American Life. I've always heard about it, but I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, I think it's an important issue regardless. And Shelby's right. It is prevalent all over the world. As I often say, people like to berate and belittle the average American more often than not. And as I've often said, if you think that Americans are the dumbest people in the world, have a wander around your home country and ask them certain questions, and you'll be very surprised as you quickly discover that there seems to be a lot of stupid people around everywhere. They're not just in America. And I think it's frustrating. It's a cliche. It's a trope. It's like when I was speaking to Lyle Blackburn recently, because we've done an episode on his new book, the Lake Worth Monster from the 60s. And a lot of the dismissal of that was that, as Lyle said himself, a lot of people were considered rednecks because of where they grew up and where they lived, and because it was such a rural part of Texas. And so you have these cliches. Evelyn Hollow once made an excellent point where she was saying a lot of people dismiss really big paranormal stories because the people involved in them are working class people.
Yeah.
And therefore, a lot of the learned people, be they parapsychologists or skeptics or whatever, are educated to a certain level and therefore believe that the working classes are obviously idiots because they don't have a degree or they didn't have that opportunity and therefore they must all be stupid. Which, as I've often said to anybody, if you think somebody who works with their hands is stupid, try and do what they do then, if you're so clever. And 99 million times out of 100 million, they'll not be able to do it because you can't be stupid and fix a car. You can't be stupid and create an incredible piece of art. You can't be dumb if you're a care worker or, if you're, just because you're working in a restaurant or a bar doesn't mean you're an idiot. Sometimes you're there because life's given you that hand and you've ended up there. Or some people, like I did, I loved working in bars when I was younger. I thought it was great, primarily because I had too much energy and I couldn't sleep a lot.
Honestly, man, some of the smartest people I know right now are working in jobs that are not utilizing their intelligence to its highest and best use. They're certainly not stupid. I am infuriated on the daily because I hear stories about people talking to them like they're stupid.
Yeah.
But no, they are fabulously intelligent. They just, sometimes they're not a great fit. And right now the job market sucks. That's another thing. The job market is hot garbage. So yeah, no, I'm always upset when classism comes into the paranormal because I just don't, it should be one of the places that's not an issue. And somehow that just keeps getting turned around.
Well, it is a major thing. And once you start examining certain big cases, you will often see that one of the explanations is that the people involved are idiots or not very clever. You know, Hopkinsville is a prime example of that.
Oh, yeah. That was the one where they're all drunks.
They're all drunks shooting at owls. Yeah, of course they are.
Because you know what those people are like.
Well, exactly. There's always that. You know what they're like.
Yeah.
No, I don't actually. Tell me, what are they like?
Yeah, I kind of feel like you're talking shit. So thank you very much, Shelby.
Yes, thank you very much, Shelby. And keep on keeping on, my love.
All right, next one is from Daniel. Daniel says, can you explain to me why all the Canadian shows show America? You never see the Canadian flag, or are Canadians ashamed of their Canadian? I assume maybe of the Canadianness is what Daniel means. And Daniel, there is more, but I decided not to include it. I'm not totally sure what you mean, but I think what you mean is, why do Canadian shows not talk as much about Canadian stuff? And I don't have a broader cultural answer, but I will say from my perspective, the reason Ghost Story Guys was not started as a Canadian show, as a show that talked about Canada, despite the fact that both Ian and I were Canadian, is because at that point in the podcast market in 2016, we were talking about it, 2017 when we started, there were several articles published about how being a Canadian podcast was commercial death. No one gave a shit. Advertisers weren't paying any attention to Canadian shows. Canadians historically don't consume a lot of Canadian content, you know, and like when we do consume Canadian content, it's like culturally approved Canadian content. It's capital C Canadian content, you know, sort of fitting like the traditional Canadianness. And maybe that's not right, but that's always been my impression of it.
Yeah.
So
it's probably because you still wish you were British, I think.
So as I was saying, I just position the show as an American-facing show because that's where I knew the audience was. And honestly, that's where it still is. Like 75% of our audience is American. The actual share of Canadians who listen to our show is, it's actually smaller than the UK listeners. The percentage. And it's funny because I remember a long time ago, what was it? When we got Huel, because of course Huel's not sold in Canada. And so in order to they were able to ship it directly to you, but in order to get mine, they had to send it to our network who remailed it to me because it could not be commercially shipped, it could be privately shipped. So I had, a couple bags of Huel and then we did the ad for it. And someone sent this quite sarky email saying, well, I went to buy it and I noticed it's not available in Canada. Seems weird to me that you being in Canada has somehow got this thing that you can't get here. And I have to imagine the majority of your audience is Canadian. And I'm like, no, man, it's not. You are wrong on a number of levels. But no, the vast majority of our audience is American. So yeah, again, it is very true. Canadians are not great at consuming Canadian content. I know so many more Americans who are up on the Canadian shows that have come out over the years. Even Schitt's Creek is a very Canadian show that became popular in America first, as I understand it. And then Canada kind of grudgingly went, okay, Big Daddy America has approved it. So I guess we will consider it acceptable now. It's just a weird cultural thing we have.
Yeah, Murdoch Mysteries.
I still can, every time you bring it up, I'm like, what? It's a British show. What the fuck are you talking about? But it is not. Every time it happens.
It's just got lots of British actors in it.
Yeah, that's it.
Like a retirement home. Does anybody in England fancy 3 months in Canada? Come.
And why wouldn't
we'll write you in as a Victorian baddie or something.
There are trees. You'll be able to taste the food. No, come on over, guys.
There are more Michelin-starred restaurants in England and France.
In London.
No. Not at all. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. There's plenty in North.
Yeah, I'm dating a Michelin-starred restaurant. It's just you can't meet her because she lives in Canada.
Next up, Nixie says, "Hi guys, recently discovered your podcast and I've been binging the back catalogue. I'm on The Haunting of LA Part 2. Ha! Thought I'd tell you about one of my weird encounters. So, when I was 7, we moved to the house I grew up in near DC. The house was built in 1953 with no bad history as far as I know. But it always felt like there was somebody at the bottom of the basement stairs, watching me when I went up or down them. It wasn't a cobwebby, dusty cellar either. This was a finished basement with a rec room and laundry room, and even a bedroom and bathroom in the back. Those stairs always gave me the creeps. Now, I never actually saw anything there, but I had a distinct picture in my mind's eye of a stocky, bald man in a navy pinstripe suit, wiping his sweating forehead with a handkerchief and holding a gun, pointed at me in the other. No idea if that had any bearing on what was actually there, but it's what I distinctly remember feeling and seeing in my head. Fast forward to high school, and a friend was sleeping over while my folks were out of town, and we were raiding the liquor cabinets as one does. Been there too many times. We were both moody teens, and she said, "I'm going to go sit in the dark for a few minutes while I was mixing drinks." And she went and sat a couple of steps down on the basement stairs after shutting the door. A few minutes later, she came back bolting into the kitchen, white as a sheet, and I asked her what was wrong. Something came up the stairs at me. I'd never as so much mentioned that I felt like there was something down there. Interestingly, they renovated the basement and stairs a few years after I moved out. I've heard that can stir up activity, but it seems to have had the opposite effect. It was still marginally creepy, but there was much less of a presence after that. Anyway, I hope you can use that, and I'm really enjoying the podcast. Thanks, Nixie.
Well, thank you, Nixie. I hope that I hope you keep listening long enough to get to this episode. Appreciate you sharing. And man, Haunting of LA Part 2 seems like another life. I mean, we're almost at episode 200, man. You and I have been doing this essentially as long now as I did the show with Ian. It's kind of crazy to think.
Yeah.
You poor bastard.
It's all right. Thankfully, I've got the narcotics and alcohol to get me through it.
Me too. So thank you very much for the story, Nixie. And finally, before we head to our interview with author and artist extraordinaire Mike Bass, we have a message from our patron, Sonia. Sonia says, "It took me forever to listen to this one because my stupid body interfered with everyday life and pleasure for a few months there, but I finally did it. Your resident Italian-Canadian, currently based in Italy, loved this episode." This is about the haunting of Italy, or high strangeness in Italy. "Thanks so much, guys, for doing these stories justice. I might email you with a Tuscany tale sometime soon. In the meantime, thank you as always for your excellent work." And thank you, Sonia. It's great to have you back. I'm glad you're feeling better.
Oh, Tuscany, one of the most beautiful parts of Europe.
I still have not seen it, and I am poorer for it.
Yes, I love Italy.
Well, if you love Italy, maybe there's an ad for a Italian tourist bureau in this next ad segment. Probably not. I think mostly it's like trampolines and ads for guns that they lied about so they could still play on the show.
Yeah. If Giorgio wants me to have some clothes, he knows where I live. Bellissimo.
Bellissimo. All right, guys. Thank you so much for your emails, your comments. Again, there's so many. We can only get to a few on this episode because we have this really great conversation with Mike Bass coming up. But if you want to send us a comment or question, shoot us a message at ghoststoryguys@gmail.com. You can also reach us on Instagram as The Ghost Story Guys, Facebook, all those places. But if you want something read out on Talk Spooky, best place is to email us at ghoststoryguys@gmail.com. All right, we are going to take a quick break to pay the bills, and we'll be right back with author Mike Bass talking about the folklore of North America. Welcome back. As we said before the break, on this episode, we have another very special guest. This is someone I first heard on Paul's show on Mysteries and Monsters, and I was very excited to have a conversation. He is the author of Frightful Folklore of North America, illustrated folk horror from Greenland to the Panama Canal. And folks, it is a beautiful, beautiful book. So check it out, and we will be saying that frequently throughout this episode. And once you hear us talk to the man, you'll understand even more so why we're saying that. Mike Bass, welcome to the Ghost Story Guys.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
It is great to have you. Like I said, I love the conversation you had with Paul on the show. What I've read of the book is just stellar. Like it is such a truly, again, it's a truly beautiful book, both in composition and in the art style. It's just such a unique piece.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm happy that you're enjoying it. I'm very happy with it too. It's just a nice kind of little read. Many little stories. You can kind of get through it pretty quickly, but they are enchanting in the way it's put together. So I'm very happy you're enjoying it.
And what I love too is as you guys touched on in Mysteries and Monsters, so many people, when they talk about North America, they think North America, genuinely, they think it extends as far as Canada and the US. And so consequently, the scope of the book is enormous. And just to get us started, I'm kind of curious, how long from concept to, so I guess final draft did it take you to put the whole thing together?
It was probably, I'd have to say, a year and maybe 3 months. I had been kind of thinking about it ahead of time. What it could be. And I have a wonderful publisher, Fiona Robertson at Watkins in London. And when the idea came up, it was just sort of, I already had in my mind this long list of likes of things I would like to do. But when it actually came to putting them all down on paper and getting them into the Word doc, basically, and also doing some more research and investigation, it got really long. It extended into about 200 different stories, a little over 200 stories, and then from there we had to whittle it down, just because time.
Oh yeah, that's what decides the end of a project is time.
Yes, exactly. There's that looming deadline out there. That's sort of like, as you're completing stuff, you're rapidly working on things, and the deadline's out there going. Cutting things off the back end of it. You're like, and then you finally meet somewhere, and you're like, okay, it's 100.
That's it.
It was whittled down ahead of time. So we kind of came up with the number that was in the book, and I sort of my beginning goal was to sort of try to get as many of the folk people cultures in North America represented. So I knew I needed to go, up through the Northlands and down through America proper, the U.S. Knew I wanted to hit the islands, and then also much of Mexico and then Central America. So I sort of just kind of started placing names and drawing where they were from and what culture they came from, and knew I had kind of that 175 to 100 story limit in there, and just eliminated from there on which ones I wanted to do. So criteria of region and culture, and then preference.
When I read the story of the hi-hat, I was actually not familiar that the region that the hi-hat is found, sort of where Ontario and New York meet. Yep. I was not aware that was referred to as the Western Door region. Yeah,
and it's the Western Door because obviously, there's maybe 100-meter drop between Erie and Ontario. And that drop is mostly Niagara Falls. So the Western Door was referred to that because it was a portage area. So if you were on Lake Ontario or Erie and you wanted to get to the other one, you had to haul your boats out of the water and lug them across land and then drop them in the other lake. And so it's a very valuable piece of property because that was land because that was obviously the shortest distance between the two lakes walking. And yeah, hi-hat. That's it's also the Seneca territory. So the Allegheny Seneca Reservation is over in that area. There are also a handful of other indigenous folk that ended up in that area as well. But hi-hat is a Seneca story.
Having a look around, I had no idea there were so many different folklore creatures just from that region. This is why I was curious about how you whittled it down, because you've got the the Great Snake of the Allegheny. There's the Hobgoblin. So a lot of different options. So
the land there is so weird. You have all those escarpments that kind of like are almost like belts in that area that go towards Lake Ontario. And then there's a lot of marshland and a lot of water, a lot of fluid in there. And all of those things, you got the Finger Lakes just kind of to the east. All of that stuff is just sort of breeding ground for folklore, right? For tales, for cryptids, for scary things to kind of come out of the dark and mess with you.
Yeah. I did find it interesting that, for all the variety in the region and all the different ways these things can come at you, I thought it was interesting that the high hat it's the oldest trope. This is someone who preys on kids.
Yep.
And that is really such a cornerstone of our fears, going back right as far as we've recorded things. The bad thing is the thing that goes after our kids.
Yep. And that's, I've talked about this too, even just like, because one of my first projects I did was the Folklore Oracle deck. And that was sort of taking folklore tropes or folklore themes and sort of looking at them across the whole broad spectrum of people. And one of those tales is that, you see like the Brothers Grimm and Hansel and Gretel, which is actually a tale from the Balkans, the Baltics area from the 1300s. And it's a witch stealing some kids, fattening them up, going to eat them. Here in Wisconsin, we had the Ho-Chunk tribe, and they had a tale that was very similar, which is a picnic point. Witches steal a bunch of kids, take them to their lair, plan on fattening them up, going to eat them. And you go all the way out to where your wife lives, way out in the Vancouver area. You have the Salish, who have Zunukwa, who is another like wild woman of the woods. Her trick is stealing kids, taking them to her home, fattening them up, eating them. So it is. It's a very, very common theme in folklore tales and stories.
Which I thought was kind of maybe darkly funny if you think about how the high hat is set to go after runaway kids.
Yep.
And you think about people being real bastards to their kids and going, well, hey, you think you got it bad here? You wait till you get out to the swamp and high hat gets you.
Yep. Yeah. And again, it's one of those tales, right? It's like, you don't want to run away. You do your chores. Eat what we're going to give you. If you run away, you might not get back.
That's it. We don't have a circus yet. You can't join that. So it's either here or the swamp and something eating you.
Well, it still permeates though into modern culture, because I went to see the new version of Salem's Lot.
Yes.
And after getting through the first 30 minutes, I thought it settled down and it was all right. But I have to say, the first 30 minutes, Julie looked at me and she was like, "This isn't very good." And I said, "Hang on, let's just hang in there."
Yes.
It's been a long time since I've walked out of a cinema. And there was only about 20 people in anyway, so it would have been very noticeable, though somebody did leave before the end. And King's always had that running through quite a lot of his books, of this fear and present danger that affects the children usually first, or as we've seen in loads of science fiction and horror films, the kids are always switched on before the adults who seem to be walking around blindly. And yet here we are, we've got these stories that go back nearly 1,000 years, like you say, about Hansel and Gretel coming from the Baltics. And it's still as prevalent in modern culture and literature as it was all those years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you still see it happening, in the theater. La Llorona is another one. La Villa Chichima is in the book as well. She, takes kids, fattens them up, steals them. The Qualapak is another one that's in the book that is about, children getting too close to the melting ice in the spring, falling into the water from the ice flow. So yeah, it's in a lot of places. Kids have it rough.
Yeah, you're not kidding. I'm kind of curious, where does this come from for you? You're obviously well versed in folklore. This must be a long-time interest.
Yes, it is actually. It came upon me when I went to school, and I really wanted to sort of answer some fears from my childhood. I grew up in a house that was haunted. We had 3 ghosts in the house. There was a female ghost that sort of resided in a particular room and would occasionally make her way around the house. A male ghost that was a little bit more raucous, knock things off of tables, shelves, pictures off of walls, and would occasionally yell one of my sister's names, which was very unnerving. And then another visitor ghost that kind of came to the house. But they weren't necessarily terrifying spirits or hauntings, but they definitely caused a lot of nervous anxiousness, fear, trepidation throughout my early years in childhood. And so as I found art in college, I just started drawing and researching scary things, frightening things, to sort of put a face and a name and identity on the things that scared me when I was a kid. I was lucky I had a professor in Eau Claire. I went to the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire, northern Wisconsin. And it was a participation class, which is very good for artists because I don't like taking tests. And part of the participation was reading from the reference library. And so reading about all these things that these various artists had done over their careers to sort of vanquish the fears that they had or to take care of issues that they had from their lives through their art was just a really relatable sort of topic for me. And also learning about history too was really good, because that's where you start to just really dig into the human experience and figuring out what other generations have had to go through and what we've gone through. And it was good.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of curious. I mean, growing up in a haunted house, obviously, as I know Paul has mentioned, that was his experience as well. In addition to sort of driving you towards learning about things like folklore, how did that sort of change your day-to-day life? I mean, how did you kind of find a way to fold that into your concept of the world?
When you grow up in a house with spirits, it sort of becomes commonplace. The sort of strangeness and oddity is almost expected. You expect, you walk into a room and you see something and you're like, oh, that's right there. That's going to fall off. Something's going to happen to that. It's going to fly across the room. So, I moved out and I went, to college, and, first you live in the dorms, mandatory, boring. But then every house that I moved into after Dormland, it was just one of those things, or apartment, where it's like, okay, when's the first thing going to happen? You start watching for it.
Oh, interesting.
And I did live in a few haunted apartments through college. And I think, people always ask, oh, so do you think that you're sensitive now? Or sensitive? Do you think that you have that sort of like gift? And I'm like, I don't know if I wouldn't necessarily say it's a gift. I would just say that it's because I'm aware that it exists and I'm watching for it or I'm looking for it. I'm more apt to see it. It's not necessarily that they're trying to reach out to me as much as it's just like, oh, yeah, that's not supposed to happen while it is. But yeah, so I think that sort of is how that worked. And even to this day, I will occasionally have a piece of metal on me. When I leave a place that feels kind of funny, I try to find water to cross to kind of, keep the spirit behind me. Luckily here in Wisconsin and Madison, there's lots of water, so I can have no problem finding the Ahara River or the Starkweather River or something else to cross to cleanse the path behind me.
Yeah, well, I'm always interested in talking to people who have that outlook, because I think, so much of the ghost culture and haunted culture has become really kind of overblown to sell TV shows, to sell ad space and things like this, right? Everything's a demon and so on and so forth. That it's reassuring to talk to someone and refreshing to talk to someone who just goes, yeah, this is a thing. It's not special. It's not fancy. It's not, it doesn't have to be frightening. I'm sure it can, for a variety of reasons, be frightening, but it doesn't have to be. You just go, I feel something. There's a couple things I do and I don't feel it anymore. We don't have to make a production out of it. And I think that's very cool. And I wish there was more of that. I don't know if we'd have a show if that was everyone's outlook, but at the very least, I think we could benefit from more of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think, and I often say that our spirits weren't, or our ghosts weren't the ghosts of Hollywood, right? There wasn't a half decomposing body stuffed in a closet somewhere that would, reach its bloody hand out from the darkness and tap you on the shoulder or grab you. But it was, it was more commonplace and sort of a daily thing. Like you could feel the presence regularly. I think I've explained this before, that it was just sort of like a oppressive weight or a darkness that kind of came over certain rooms or certain times of the day, a melancholy almost, or melancholia. But I mean, it was enough, if you think of a 7-year-old kid, coming home from school and walking into that's more than enough to be frightening, or to make you feel off balance or off kilter.
Another one of the folklore, one of the tales you covered was Hurricane Annie or Cyclone Annie.
Cyclone Annie, yeah. Cyclone Annie.
I love Annie.
Yes, so that was that's in Illinois, and of course, as you know, we're kind of just north of Tornado Alley. I'd say that goes more through northern Texas and Oklahoma, but it's kind of this too is sort of a common tale. The oppressed outsider, the person who sort of is living at the edge of society or a community, and because they may be not necessarily the same as everyone, they might be a little quieter, they might hang with themselves a little bit more, they may not be a joiner. Over time, certain making fun of them with your friends, to starting to do a sort of a hoot or a call, and making fun of them to them or to other people that you don't know, slowly escalates until it's a full-blown situation of really almost bullying or tormenting people who don't seem to belong. And so that's the tale of this one. And I get sort of by the end of it, she's had her house started on fire, she's run out of town, and she perishes. She has a heart attack, but she curses the city, saying, I'll be back in a year's time and you'll regret this. And of course, we here in the Midwest have enough fears about tornadoes that to think that it's an actual person seeking revenge that's kind of wound up in it makes it even more terrifying. So Annie does come back a year later, destroys the town, and the only hint that it was her is that they see this unknown person in a black dress making her way through the wreckage of what the cyclone has done to the town.
And I thought that was really telling. That when I was sitting here with it, and I thought, it's kind of fascinating to me that this story about othering someone in the end reinforces that othering, because she really was a witch. Like if we are to be believed, then sure, we ostracized her and we burned down her house, but I mean, in the end, she called down a tornado on us. So really, weren't we justified in this? And I thought it's kind of
and so in a way, and I always say this too, is like folklore doesn't always necessarily get it right on the head. In a way, this story could be twofold. I mean, you could look at it two ways. One is we mistreated this woman. We caused all this damage to her. She ended up dying. And then because of what we did, because of how we behaved, our city was destroyed. Right. Or you could look at it as like, oh, we were right to do it because, she was actually a witch. But in this one, I choose to think that it's like, oh, hey, lesson learned. You shouldn't pick on people just because they're different, because it might come back to get you. But I mean, you do see this tale in a lot of different places where that person who is the outsider does get sort of mistreated to the extent of them of bad things happening.
There's that Rob Zombie movie, Lords of Salem, which is about these, three like witches who were falsely accused and murdered. Now they've come back to take revenge. And I got to tell you, man, I think if they come back to take revenge, they weren't falsely accused. I just don't think that's how it works. Yes. I don't know if there's anyone up there being like if Freddy Krueger was just a guy, he doesn't go quietly into that good night. He goes, no, I'm going to murder their kids for a few generations. I think you deserve to be burned, my guy, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Well, of course, he was also the child of 10,000 maniacs. So,
well, yeah, that's fair.
Or 1,000 maniacs. I can't remember how many it was.
I think it was son of 100 maniacs.
Oh, 100. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I was thinking 10,000 maniacs. I think it's a band.
Yeah, that was a band. Yes. Exactly.
Just singing Because the Night. Oh, there he goes. Son of 10,000 maniacs.
That's why it's after him. They took the album back.
Yeah, but you do often find the tales of the outsider who is labeled a witch. Like we have one up by Ripon, and it just ended up that they were two sisters who never married, so they lived out their lives in their childhood home after their parents died, and they were a little quirky, and that was it. But they, it's even still called Witch Road. It's up by towards Green Bay. Well, Bloody Mary is very similar to it. That was, again, another woman who was on the edges of society, and they accused her of axing her family or a different family. And now you can call her up in a mirror with a candle.
I can't help but notice that these are all very female-centric cautionary tales. And I was thinking about, there's a story in my hometown. I'm from a little town in Western Canada originally. And there's a haunted house called Holton House. The house is sort of the 800-pound gorilla in town as far as hauntings go. It's got stories going back at least 50 years that I was able to find by interviewing people. But when you go back to the 50s, the house, which was built in 1897, this grand Queen Anne, very, very lovely, showy house on the hill, it was just occupied at that point by two brothers, one of whom, by all accounts, was a real weirdo. And yet, kids would just go hang out there with the other brother, who would have donuts for them, and they would just It's a fairy tale all on its own. But no one burned him, And no. I mean, there is some people might suggest that maybe they should have, but no one had a problem with him hanging around with a bunch of kids, and his name isn't Mr. Rogers. But in all these stories with these women who like they must want the kids, it must be after the kids.
Yeah. Well, and I mean that goes all the way back, right, to the witch scares, the Reformation during the 1500s. It was primarily women who were accused and executed. Obviously, there was a handful of men and also children, but it was mostly the women who were tried, convicted, sentenced.
So another one of the stories I wanted to talk about, or to have you sort of tell us about, because it was one I was totally unaware of, the Tucacame.
Oh, yeah. So that comes from sort of central Mexico, sort of where Huacuta Desert is at. And it's sort of like a mountain desert. It's sort of between the Sierra Madre Mountains and I needed to write all this stuff down. Another range that's down there. But being that it's a mountain desert or a high desert, it gets quite cool at night, as most deserts do. But this one is even more so. But yeah, that Tucacame is sort of a creature from the underworld. Again, he's sort of this like dark, almost shape-shifting type creature, because sometimes he can be like a black wolf that's mangy and covered in dried blood. And you can see it just sort of padding through the desert in and out of the shadows of the mountains. Because also, yes, he typically also shows up during the new moon. So as the sun is setting, there's no moon rising to sort of aid you when you're out in this dark, dark desert. So you might see this black wolf that's, got blood matted hair running through the shadows. When he's not a wolf, sort of a man-shaped body with the typical leathery bat wings. Some tales have him with buzzard wings, so actually feathers, like black feathers.
Oh, interesting.
But, the predominant tale is with these leathery bat wings. He's got horns like a typical devil would have, long, sort of broken off, razor sharp nails. And again, he's filthy. The stories say that, he hates water. So because he hates water, he's never bathed a day in his life. He's never washed any of his crimes or any of his things he's committed off of his skin. So here you have this devil-like creature, basically, save for the fact that he doesn't have goat-like or feet or hooves. But he sort of is on the lookout for folks who are in the wrong place at the wrong time. And he will, take you away. And it's typically, as the story goes, he prefers decaying flesh, rotted flesh to fresh. So if you happen to come across him or he comes across you and decides you're prey, they say he'll lodge you somewhere in a rock somewhere so that he can come back in a month's time and consume your flesh. But the other really creepy thing about him is that he also wears, a lot of stories say he wears the bones of his victims around on a belt around his waist. So you get this sort of strange maraca sound as he's coming in towards you. There's a nice little, because the bones are all on his waist belt are all rattling together.
He just coming towards you sounding like a Tom Waits song?
Yes, exactly.
There can't be many creatures like that, Mike, that have got their own sort of incidental music as they take you to
right. Yeah. Yeah. Let's think about it. Well, the rattlesnake. But yeah, so this is he's somewhat terrifying thing. There's also tales of him being accompanied by pets made of skeletons. So he has like large birds that follow him around that are skeletal in some stories. And again, he's kind of a common character. So there are, similar to the Wendigo here in the Midwest and into Canada, there's different stories written about how he behaves and what he does and how he acts and the critters that follow him around.
Mike, we could keep you here talking about this stuff all day, but we will tell folks they should absolutely pick up the book. It is, it is so good. Can you give us the full title again?
It is Frightful Folklore of North America, illustrated folk horror from Greenland to the Panama Canal.
Yes, there we go. Paul has it in his hands. Again, yep. a fabulous book, available through Penguin Random House here in Canada.
Yes. Yep. It was published by Watkins Publishing out of London, which does quite a few books that are folklore based or folk story based. So they have a wonderful collection of books. If you get a chance, check those out as well.
Very cool. Out of curiosity, anything you're working on next?
I have a couple of projects going right now. I'm working on a print series that is the classics or the legendary, series. So kind of the cryptids or the folk tales that we all know. So the Jersey Devil, the Hopkinville Goblins, Van Meter Monster. Yes. What's that?
Yeah. Hey, all my favorites, Mike. Keep going.
Yes, the Frogman of Ohio. Yes.
Loveland, yeah.
So obviously I have Sasquatch and the Mothman, but I'm working on just a sort of a portfolio or print series of those particular stories. And then there'll be a few offshoots. There's like the golden-haired maiden or the golden-haired girl story from New Jersey, who was a woman who apparently is lovelorn. Either she wasn't allowed to marry the man she loved, and so she committed, she threw herself into the ocean, or he threw himself into the ocean. And so there's this dear picture that I have in my head because it said that you see her by the sea, and often the Jersey Devil will have accompanied her and be sitting next to her or be behind her. So I just see this kind of lovely image of this woman, this golden-haired woman looking love lost into the ocean with the Jersey Devil behind her. So
I love it.
Yeah. And again, so I often choose my tales and my stories that I cover by what I see, what I can kind of see the image going along with it, and that's definitely one of them.
I cannot wait to see it. Since it is October, spooky season is upon us. Are you much of a horror movie guy?
I am, but I've been working too busy to really catch up on anything new. I did watch the new Salem's Lot though, and I thought they did a good job. But do you have any recommendations for me?
Probably. Yeah. Let me, I will.
The Substance.
The Substance is fantastic. If you have any interest in body horror, so good. I also enjoyed, I haven't seen as many new ones lately. I've been kind of busy. Oddity actually is fantastic.
Oh yes. That's on the watch list, on L Prime. So yeah, it's out there.
Yeah. That was great. And another one.
Also like a lot of the old ones. Keanu Reeves, Bram Stoker's Dracula is pretty
classic.
Good. That's classic. So I have those sort of also in like the queue as to what's coming up, what to watch when I get a free night to just kind of sit around and not have anything on my list of things to do.
Yeah. Return of the Living Dead.
Oh yeah, nice. Those are all good too. I love a good zombie movie. There's not enough good ones being made these days. They seem to kind of stray off into comedy more so than to the seriousness of zombie horror.
Yeah, I think Busan was probably the last great one.
Yeah.
I'm told that Netflix's Black Summer is good. It's a series.
Oh, okay.
But it was directed by John Hyams. And Hyams, he does a lot of direct-to-video stuff, but he's very, very good.
Okay.
Cool. So yeah, I've heard good things about Black Summer as far as zombie movies go. And actually, One Cut of the Dead, if you haven't seen it, is a Japanese film. You got to stick with it because the opening, you're going to think, what the hell am I watching? But there's a turn about 20 minutes in, and it's actually kind of a heartwarming movie, surprisingly enough.
Heartwarming horror.
Heartwarming horror. Heartwarming.
Yeah. That's a title.
Yeah, it is. It's all yours. All yours.
All right. Let's see what I can do with it.
Yeah, if you want to admire the Canadian scenery and think, why am I watching this film for an hour and a half, you can watch In a Violent Nature.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Just wandering around, killing kids.
Yeah, it's like Friday the 13th was a walking simulator. It was.
Yes. Yes. Yes, I've seen the trailers. I haven't gotten into it yet either. But yeah, that's also a good one.
I drove an hour and a half to see that because it wasn't playing anywhere near me. So I drove into Toronto to go see that. I remember sitting there thinking, was this worth the hour and a half? The 3-hour round trip I took to see this? I don't know. And it eventually came here. I went and saw it again. And I still don't know. I honestly don't. I still don't know. Again, our guest has been Mike Bass. Mike, where can everyone find you online?
You can find me on Instagram, Wisco Mythos. And then you can also find me on my website, inkandstory.com.
Brilliant. And we'll have links to all of that in the show notes. Again, the book is Frightful Folklore of North America, Illustrated Folk Horror from Greenland to the Panama Canal. It was released last month in September 2024. Folks, you're going to want to check it out. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Welcome back. Thanks again to author Mike Bass for hanging out with us, talking about his new book, Frightful Folklore of North America, Illustrated Folk Horror from Greenland to the Panama Canal. Again, it's a beautiful, beautiful book. And if you liked what Mike had to say, check it out. It is such a dense collection of very cool lore.
I would say it's essential for anybody who loves folklore, legends, and myths. It's an essential book. As much as Brett Manning's One Foot in the Green ones last year, this for me is the most essential and wonderful book I've got my hands on this year. And I've bought far too many, yet again, as my recent discovery of that wonderful Sasquatch book with the mysterious clipping inside it proved.
Yeah, you found that while we were on the call.
Yeah, and I hadn't opened it. I just flicked through it, saw that, and then I thought, oh, what's this? And there was loads of like bits, because when you buy books, sometimes they'll have bits in them. And I just thought, oh, perhaps it's just a piece of paper. And then when I opened it up and I just saw Bigfoot, and I was like, what? I've got a clipping here that's a month older than I am.
I love finding shit like that in old books. All right, my friend, where can everyone find you online?
You can find Mysteries and Monsters across all social media networks and on all good podcast platforms.
You can also find Fear Daily on those podcast platforms. That is, of course, my daily fiction podcast, hosted by Brandon Scheck-Snyder and written by yours truly. And you can find me on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd as Largely the Truth. As always, we like to finish Talk Spooky with a song, and on this episode, we are sharing a single from the Victoria band Signal Static, and that song is called Cancel Me. Again, that is Signal Static. You'll find links to them in the show notes, and if you like what you hear, check them out on streaming platforms everywhere. Again, that is Signal Static with Cancel Me. Thanks as always for joining us. And we'll be back next week with episode 200, Paul. 200.
Oh my God. Shut the front door.
OMG. Episode 2 fucking 0. I'm having a hard time processing. I gotta be honest with you.
Yeah, once you do your first 200, you get used to another one.
There we go. Got Paul Bestel to guide us into the end zone.
Unlike those Cowboys.
Jesus Christ. We had someone comment and said, boy, I sure like that joke Paul made about the Cowboys in the last episode. I'm like, don't encourage him. Don't encourage him.
I don't need to make more jokes about the Cowboys. They do a great one themselves. I've never cheered on Detroit more since I watched RoboCop.
We'll see you next week. This is Signal Static and Cancel Me.